how's it going, everybody? It's Young here with my E3 2017 hands-on impressions of Metal Gear Survive. A couple of disclaimers before I begin. Disclaimer 1, the folks I met in E3 2017 were community managers and PR from Konami LA. The stuff happening in Japan is way beyond them. They're just doing their jobs, so if you have any contempt to express, direct them over to the corporate shitheads in Japan, the ones who are actually responsible for the Konami fiasco and for Metal Gear Survive's existence. Disclaimer 2, if you're looking for me to answer whether Metal Gear Survive is good enough to annul your distaste for Konami and where they've taken the Metal Gear series, I can tell you right now that Survive won't change these notions. It is by no means a mind-blowing game, and its very idea and existence is still questionable to me. However, what does exist isn't terrible either. For those who don't care about the politics surrounding Konami, for those willing to look past the Metal Gear name, the game functions, does some things competently, and even with its imperfections, can potentially be fun. Finally, disclaimer 3, my contempt for the Konami fiasco and the idea of Metal Gear Survive is no secret. So why cover this game at all? Well, the fact of the matter is that even if I decide not to cover this game, everyone else will. So instead of making some kind of stand that won't really leave much of a dent, I figured it would be more useful for me to bring you an honest perspective. So with all that out of the way, allow me to convey my full Metal Gear Survive hands-on experience. I checked in Konami's private booth at around 11 p.m. on day 3 of E3 2017. As soon as I walked in, I was greeted with an intimate area with various Metal Gear Survive stations set up on PS4. Hanging on the right wall were a variety of life-sized models for some of the weapons featured in the game, which they actually allowed me to pick up and take some pictures with. Yes, I do recognize the irony of the Death Stranding t-shirt inside the Metal Gear Survive booth. It was completely unintentional, but the Konami LA folks didn't pay mind to it, so neither did I. After taking some pictures and getting settled in, I was eventually guided to my station alongside 3 other media members who became part of my 4-man squad. But before we got to pick up our controllers, we were given a presentation conveying basic information of the game. They began by emphasizing that Metal Gear Survive is a spin-off, with the goal being to add the survival genre to Metal Gear gameplay. It was then detailed how in the final game, players will be able to build their characters from scratch through the character creator, how they'll be able to further customize their characters by choosing a class, by leveling up, and by equipping new weapons and gear, and how the game is now slated for an early 2018 release window for PS4, Xbox One, and Steam. We were then given an explanation of the demo. Survive will feature a single-player campaign, but what we got to play was one of the game's 4-player co-op missions called Defend the Generator, which involves 3 phases. Phase 1 is called Infiltration. The goal is to get past zombies surrounding the perimeter of a ravaged mother base and find your way into the base proper. Phase 2 is called Secure. This is the phase in which we collect resources, stock up on ammo, set up defenses, and fortify the base before we place the generator that will draw the zombies in. Finally, Phase 3 is called Defend, the meat of the game. Once the generator is placed, the goal is to stave off 3 waves of zombie hordes to defend the generator from being destroyed by the zombies, and of course, survive the encounter. With this explanation out of the way, we finally got to pick up our controllers and dive into the game. After being greeted by a very Resident Evil-esque title screen, I was taken to character selection. Now, normally I would be able to create and customize my character's facial features, class, and gear from scratch, but since we were limited on time, we were offered 4 presets instead that we could choose from. 2 of them were melee-based, and 2 of them were shooter-based. The character I chose was a female with silver hair who wielded an assault rifle and bow and arrow as her primary weapons and a pistol as her secondary. From what I could see, the other shooter preset wielded a shotgun instead of an assault rifle, and the 2 melee characters wielded everything from spears to makeshift greatswords. Now, 3 of us picked the same character, the female with the silver hair, and only 1 other person picked the shooter with a shotgun. So, not the most balanced party, but it's just a demo, so nobody cared. After picking our characters, we were taken to an interactive loading hub of sorts where we could not only check information about each character's loadout and the mission, we could also use this time to get used to the game's controls and sort of fuck around. Very quickly, I learned that while Survive is mechanically very similar to Metal Gear Solid 5, enough has been changed to make it feel somewhat distinct. The biggest change is the way you can now equip 3 items at the same time, a weapon and 2 gadgets. Survive's weapon selection wheel will be familiar to those who played Phantom Pain, with up and down bringing up your primary and secondary weapons respectively, and left and right bringing up other gadgets. But where Survive differs is how whatever gadget you select from your left D-pad can be readied with the L1 button, and whatever gadget you select on your right D-pad can be readied with the R1 button. In Phantom Pain, L1 would bring up the command selection wheel and R1 would bring up the binoculars. That's all gone now. You now hold L1 to aim your left D-pad gadget, R1 to aim your right D-pad gadget, and L2 to aim with your gun. That one hasn't changed. From there, you can move, strafe, look around, and use your equipped gadget by pressing X on the PS4 controller. So basically, L1 and R1 ready your equipped left and right gadgets, which you press X to use, and L2 readies your equipped weapon, which you press R2 to fire. This is actually a very smart change for Metal Gear Survive, considering how many of the items you equip in this game are intended to fortify your base. The left D-pad gadgets are comprised of defensive structures like fences and barriers that you can deploy, while the right D-pad gadgets are comprised of traps like mines, grenades, and whatnot. So with this control scheme, you can have one weapon, one defensive structure, and one trap, all readily accessible. And if you ever want to change your equipment to something else, all you have to do is hold down the appropriate button on the D-pad and make your selection from the wheel. This may not seem like a big deal starting out, but once zombies start flooding into your base and making quick work of your defenses and traps, it is vital to be able to switch between deploying defenses, deploying traps, and firing your weapon in quick succession. And this new control scheme allows you to do just that. Just hold down the right button, whether it's L2, L1, or R1, and then fire. Beyond the repurposing of the L1 and R1 buttons, the face buttons have been overhauled as well. X is now the button for contextual actions instead of triangle. You now double tap X to dive instead of pressing square. You now change stance with circle instead of X. You reload and pick things up with square instead of circle. And triangle now activates an active skill, which I didn't get a chance to test out during my play session. Having used Phantom Pain's default controller method for a while, it definitely took me some time to rewire my brain, but once I did, I found that the game controls just as well as Phantom Pain. So, after fiddling around with the controls, learning how to ready gadgets and weapons in quick succession, and shooting some friendlies in the face for a bit for target practice, all 4 of us were asked to stand in this yellow circle in the loading hub to exit the loading hub and finally dive into the co-op mission, after which a 10-second timer began counting down. I do wish the timer was a bit shorter though. Somebody stepped out by accident and we were forced to wait another 10 seconds in that circle. A 5-second timer would be more appropriate. But eventually the timer did run down and the game loaded into what is essentially a repurposed version of Phantom Pain's Afghanistan map. If you watch the Tokyo Game Show 2016 gameplay presentation, it's pretty much the exact same map and mission. Knowing our time was limited, all 4 of us quickly began heading towards the yellow marker indicating the target objective, the base that we were supposed to infiltrate as part of Phase 1. On our way, we soon encountered some zombies outside the perimeter, but unlike in the TGS 2016 gameplay demo, no attempt at stealth was made. All 4 of us just kind of marched our way through and annihilated these zombies by unloading our weapons onto them. That's when it dawned on me just how little stealth seems to matter in Metal Gear Survive, which was really disappointing. Zombies are relatively easy to kill in small quantities. They don't fire from a distance. They're too stupid to call for any substantial backup, and it was just easier and faster to shoot our way towards the base. I guess one reason you would want to stealth is to conserve ammo, but even after taking care of a couple of zombies, we still had plenty of ammo left by the time we reached the base, especially with 4 of us. Maybe things will be different once they start introducing more powerful enemies that you don't want to face head on, but from what I played, stealth seems to have very little use in this game. So we plowed our way through until we reached the base, and Phase 1 was over just like that. Once we infiltrated the ravaged Mother Base, Phase 2 kicked in. This was the time to set up defenses, collect resources, craft items and weapons, stock up on ammo, etc., before setting down the generator that will attract waves of zombies. Now, in my play session, somebody decided to set the generator down early while we were still getting ready, so we all quickly had to scramble to set up fences, barriers, traps, and whatnot, and cover as many gaps as we could before Phase 3 started. This is where Survive's new control scheme really came clutch. I already had the fences equipped on my L1 gadget, so all I had to do was to hold down L1 to ready the fences, aim, and then tap X to place them. Aim and fire, basically. I could then quickly place a trap by holding down R1 and pressing X. And if I wanted to switch to something else, I could hold down one of the D-pad buttons and cycle through the wheel and select whatever I wanted. Just like that, I found myself being able to quickly fortify our base alongside my team members. I was kind of reminded of Fallout 4's settlement system, where you can go around placing things anywhere you want as long as it doesn't collide with other objects. It's that, except it's more deeply integrated into Survive's control scheme. And of course, unlike Fallout 4's settlement system, the things you place in Survive are more focused on base fortification. Don't expect to be going around placing furniture or anything like that. So, after setting up some defenses, our minimap on the bottom right corner of the screen indicated where the zombies would be coming from through the same red circular indicators seen in Phantom Pain in areas guarded by enemy patrol. For the first wave, I could see that zombies were only appearing from 3 main roads from a northward direction, judging by the location of the red indicators, so it was pretty easy to set up and stave them off. The fences held nicely and we all stood on high ground while unloading on anything that tried to come through from that northward direction. At one point, I did run out of ammo and saw a horde of zombies coming my way, and this is where Survive's control scheme came clutch once more. I already had grenades equipped as my right D-pad gadget, so all I had to do was hold down R1 to ready a grenade, aim it, and then press X to throw it. And bam, a dozen or so zombies were annihilated just like that. Before I knew it, the first wave's timer counted down, at which point the generator we set exploded with this pulse of energy, killing all zombies nearby, and this indicated that wave 1 was over. From there, we were given a couple minutes to regroup and refortify. During this break, the game also displayed a side-op that I could undertake during the countdown to the next wave of zombies that may yield additional weapons and resources. All I had to do was follow a blue side-op indicator on the minimap. Now, it is up to your squad to decide who should go to the side-op and who should stay to help fortify the base some more. You definitely want to delegate, since fortifying the base is just as important as obtaining additional resources from these side-ops. Being curious about how this side-op would play out, we all decided to head towards the blue marker. This side-op was fairly simple. We had to go inside an abandoned building to collect weapon and ammo stashes that would allow us to refill lost ammo. Inside the structure, we also found a variety of crafting materials, random assortments of objects like pots and cans and whatnot littered about. Again, it is a lot like Fallout 4's settlement system, where you can collect all of these useless miscellaneous items scattered about that represent certain types of materials like different metals and wood. These resources can then be used to craft new weapons, new defenses, new traps, etc. So yeah, these side ops are definitely worth doing. It has its risks, since leaving your main base means leaving yourself more vulnerable and possibly encountering more powerful types of zombies outside, but the rewards can be of great help for the next wave of zombies. Once we collected everything we needed from the submission, we stocked up, refortified, and braced ourselves for the next wave of zombies. The minimap showed that this time, they weren't all just coming from one direction. A couple more red indicators could be seen from other sides of the map as well. We braced ourselves, wave 2 eventually started, and things got pretty hairy. This time I was forced to run back and forth between multiple directions. I had to refortify damaged areas with new fences at one point. I was forced to deploy one of my more powerful right D-pad gadgets, the mortar. I basically found some high ground, used R1 and X to deploy the mortar, and helmed it to lay waste to groups of zombies at a time from afar. It was also during Wave 2 that the game began introducing new types of enemies, like the suicide bomber zombies. They are big and slow, but deal a ton of damage if they manage to get close enough. With them, we were told to aim for their unprotected lower bodies, which definitely seemed to do the trick. After an arduous battle, the timer for Wave 2 counted down, the generator emitted another explosive pulse, killing nearby zombies, and with that, Wave 2 was over, after which we were given a few more minutes to regroup, refortify, and tackle another optional side-op. Once again, I made my way towards the blue icon on the minimap, this time at a different location with another party member. And what we found there was 2 walker gears sitting in the middle of a group of armored zombies. I initially tried to be stealthy, but due to the frantic nature of this mission and with how little time I had left until the next wave, it was hard to get into a stealthy mindset. So instead, I bolted ass towards the walker gear, got on it, and used its Gatling gun to lay waste to nearby zombies. I was told, however, that walker gear ammo is limited, so I had to be conservative about how I use this precious ammo. Fortunately, walker gear also had a variety of melee attacks. It can kick, it can also ram if you press R2 while running. I found these melee attacks to be a more efficient way to lay waste to weaker zombies, so once I got back to base, it became my main form of offense. So with 2 walker gears at our disposal and with a bunch of barriers, traps, and defenses in place, we thought we were ready for Wave 3, but it proved to be a much more difficult endeavor than we anticipated. Zombies came from all directions in overwhelming amounts this time. Despite our best efforts, our defenses were quickly destroyed, and with communication non-existent, with everyone kind of doing their own thing, it became extremely difficult to coordinate anything. We were all just kind of shooting whatever we saw. Eventually, our defenses were brought down and zombies began making their way into the base proper. Fortunately, I had walker gear at my disposal to ram into and eviscerate multitudes of zombies at a time. However, we were also being invaded by various other types of zombies as well, everything from the lethal suicide bomber zombies to the resilient armored zombies. Even with walker gears at our disposal, the odds on this one seemed overwhelming. Zombies were all over our base, the suicide bombers continued to break through, armored zombies kept getting in the way, and eventually, the zombies began attacking the generator itself. That's when we learned that when the generator receives too much damage, it emits an explosive pulse of energy that kills zombies nearby. This only happens in the middle of a wave once, and it's basically the game giving players a second chance, while also warning us that the generator has taken some significant damage. But this leg up from the generator was exactly what we needed as the timer for the 3rd wave counted down. From there, I decided to set up a few more defenses with L1, lay down a few mines and traps with R1, switched back to my weapon by aiming with L2, and I braced myself for the final few moments we had left. Despite the helpful hand that the generator pulse offered, with an absence of communication and coordination, the zombies eventually managed to break through again. Our walker gears were destroyed, I ran out of ammo, and at one point, my character's leg became severely injured, resulting in my character limping around. I had no choice but to find a safe place indoors, go to my iDroid, and hold down X to cure my injured limb. I was also told that I could go into my inventory and eat some food to recover my quickly depleting health and stamina, so I did that as well. From there, I jumped back into the fray, doing what I could with what little ammo and resources I had left. But I stepped out to find that the zombies were already all over the generator. A tip that I was given is that I could have set up some fences around the generator itself rather than just around the perimeter of the base, which I didn't think to do for some reason. It was too late now though. All hope seemed lost, and I figured, well, that's it, it's over. But then, boom, an explosive pulse from the generator killed all of the zombies in the vicinity, indicating that the timer managed to run down just in the nick of time with only a sliver of health left on the generator. We got lucky, even the PR dude watching over us thought we wouldn't make it. But somehow, someway, we managed to complete our mission. We were then taken to a post-match screen where we got to see our scores, and I actually managed to get first for most kills, which was kinda nice. With that, my hands-on with Metal Gear Survive concluded. 2 more things worth noting before I give my final thoughts. 1. Since I picked a shooter preset, I didn't get to try out the game's revamped melee system. I did try to CQC some zombies, but it was pretty ineffectual and awkward, probably because I had no idea how the new CQC system worked. I was told, however, that with CQC and melee weapons, you unlock different maneuvers and additional combos as you level up. 2. When I asked about Metal Gear mechs in Survive, I was simply told that it's something that they'll talk about another day. So, with all said and done, I left the Konami booth with mixed feelings. On the one hand, there were genuinely tense and fun moments during my play session, particularly during the frantic 3rd wave. Metal Gear Solid 5's repurposed mechanics and Survive's competent tower defense system in particular did make Survive's brand of zombie horde shooter feel somewhat distinct from your typical Left 4 Dead or Killing Floor, encouraging more tactical coordination and foresight, thanks to the barriers and traps you can deploy as a team, the weapons you can craft, the resources you can collect, the side ops you can do in between waves of zombies, and more. The ease of deploying barriers and traps in particular, and the dynamic that brought to the experience, is what stood out to me most about this game. On the other hand, this game did not feel like Metal Gear. It's mechanically Metal Gear Solid 5, but at its core, Survive is like the furthest thing from a Metal Gear game. Stealth, the hallmark of Metal Gear, felt completely unnecessary throughout the demo, and I also found that by borrowing so heavily from Phantom Pain's mechanics, Survive's action gameplay suffered. The thing about Phantom Pain's controls, combat systems, and shooting mechanics is that they were designed around careful planning and execution. Everything from the way you move in the game, the different stances you can take, go prone, crouch, whatever, the way you shoot, the way bullets arc realistically, the way bullets spread, and the way weapons generally feel were tailored around discouraging players from frantic spray and pray. While Phantom Pain does give you the option to go full Rambo, enemies will make quick work of you if you just run and gun without thought. You still have to take cover, take precise aim, carefully plan your movements, and come prepared with some semblance of a strategy. In Survive, on the other hand, once zombies start flooding in, words like precise, careful, strategy, and plan get thrown out of the window, leaving players no choice but to frantically run and gun. And I quickly found that Survive's borrowed action mechanics are simply not equipped to handle these types of scenarios. Phantom Pain shooting mechanics were purposely semi-unwieldy to encourage planning and precision, but this is something that simply doesn't work with a game like Survive. So what you're left with is a Metal Gear zombie shooter game that generally controls well but doesn't pull off the thoughtful stealth of a Metal Gear game or the frantic action of a zombie game due to this mismatch of gameplay mechanics and gameplay design. In that regard, Metal Gear Survive feels more like a competent fan mod of Phantom Pain than a new original game. It's like someone tried to use Elder Scrolls to make a racing game, or Minecraft to make an action game. It's a weird stitching of various genres and gameplay mechanics that don't always blend and come together. Even the Metal Gear Rising spin-off built its mechanics from the ground up to tailor to its particular brand of level and gameplay design. It had its own identity, even if it wasn't the typical stealth action Metal Gear game. Survive, on the other hand, seems to be struggling with its identity in its attempt to shove Metal Gear Solid 5 elements into a new mold that just doesn't fit. I also worry about the game's overall longevity. Questions such as how varied are the game's maps, missions, and side ops? How do classes and leveling work? How varied are the weapons and gadgets? How varied are the enemy types? How extensive is the single-player campaign? These are all important in determining whether Survive will be a game that you play once or twice and then forget about, or if it's a game that will genuinely actually keep players hooked for a while. All I've seen thus far is a vertical slice of a game that shows some potential for fun, but whether the game can come together as a compelling package with enough content and variety remains to be seen. At the end of the day, I did have fun with Metal Gear Survive, but it leaves me wondering just who exactly is this game for? If you're a Metal Gear fan, you'll be turned off by its lack of a substantial canon story and the absence of compelling stealth scenarios. If you're a zombie shooter fan or an action fan, you'll be turned off by the mismatch between Survive's design and Phantom Pain's action mechanics, which don't lend themselves to a frantic shooter. Survive lacks focus, and while there is a semblance of a potentially fun and interesting game there with its blend of Metal Gear Solid 5 mechanics, zombie shooter, and tower defense, I found that its individual components still don't quite mesh. If Survive can make stealth more relevant, rework shooting mechanics to be more efficient during frantic scenarios, and provide a wide variety of maps, missions, character builds, weapons, gadgets, enemy types, and overall content in the final product, the game might appeal to those willing to look past the Konami fiasco and the fact that it has the Metal Gear name attached to it. But my fear is that it's the very idea, the very concept, the very core of Metal Gear Survive that's flawed. Survive's very existence still perplexes me. Nothing I played convinces me that this was the best idea they could have come up with for the future of the series. But if we pretend that it's not Metal Gear, or acknowledge that it's just some fun, random, weird, bizarre spin-off, from an objective standpoint, there is some potential here. How much you're willing to look past the shit surrounding this game, that's a determination that you will have to make for yourself. So there you go, folks, my extensive hands-on impressions of Metal Gear Survive. I hope you found this video useful, and if you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon so we can remain independent from third-party sponsorship and corporate interference. If you have any questions that I failed to answer in this video about Metal Gear Survive, drop a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And to be further updated on all things Metal Gear, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out!